Every year about this time, this becomes a place of work and excitement, for they're getting ready to hold the fair.
Lots of fair stuff. My mom making pies for like days before the fair dinners, because the church put on the fair dinners in the bottom of the old grandstand. So that's pre-70.
In the heart of Kawartha Lakes, two fairs have become more than just local traditions. They're annual celebrations that bring together the best of rural life. On one side, there's the Kinmount Fair, which is a timeless gathering where history and heritage are as rich as the soils that sustain the region. And on the other hand, you have the Lindsay Exhibition, the fourth largest fair in Ontario, where the energy is just as palpable, but with its own unique blend of agricultural pride and excitement. In the 19th century, rural communities of Upper Canada were more than just places to live. They were, the centers of innovation, resilience, and even tradition. And among these traditions, the agricultural fair emerged as that cornerstone of community life. A place where people could come together and create memories that would last a lifetime, as the popular saying goes, as well as share their knowledge and their skills that would propel the future generations in their careers going forward. Back in the 1840s, agricultural fairs in the area and Ontario were beginning to take root, with some difficulty though. The first 50 years saw many fairs struggle to establish themselves, but the agricultural community eventually matured, and so did these fairs. And by the mid-1840s, reorganization led to the formation of the Agricultural and Arts Association of Upper Canada, and this board aimed to manage and promote agricultural societies across the colony, which standardized the fairs. And today they're known as the Ontario Association of Agricultural Societies, and they laid the foundation for what would become a rich tradition of annual fairs in Ontario.
All right, can you introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Guy Scott, and I've been working for the Kinmount Fair as a director, for about 50 years. Earliest memories of the Kinmount Fair, well, of course, as a kid, the Midway was big for us. But as a director, I used to do and worked in the exhibit hall in the vegetables. So I'd be gathering big pumpkins. My gosh, some of them are so big I could hardly lift them on the table. But that was how I first got started on the fair.
By the 1870s, though, Kinmount and its surrounding areas had become a central hub for those agricultural fairs. Initially it was held in the Oak Hill and later moved to Victoria Road, and these fairs reflected the agricultural prowess and the communal spirit of Victoria County and the North Victoria riding. And this riding in Victoria County saw various township societies like the Eldon Township Society and the Fenland Society, and they were both actively participating and reorganizing these events every single year. And you also had the Bexley-Laxton Agricultural Society, which held its first fair in Oak Hill in 1868. And the fairs rotated between locations, bringing together communities from Coboconk to Norland. And each year, these fairs provided that platform for farmers to display their best livestock and their crops or their innovations. And it fostered that spirit and that friendly competition and mutual learning.
Ivy Gilmore, who I've talked to Barb about, and Sarah, who's doing the book on the ladies and stuff. She was the secretary-treasurer of the fair board for many years. And you know what she got as a gift for doing it? An electric kettle.
Now we're approaching, I guess, the later half of the 1800s, and in 1872, the Somerville Agricultural Society proposed rotating their fair between Coboconk and Kinmount. But this didn't come without conflict, because when Coboconk refused to alternate, tensions started to escalate, and by 1879, Kinmount eventually established its own identity and the formation of the Galway Agricultural Society. And this society held its first fair later that year, and it set the stage for what would become a long-standing tradition in this community. The fairs were, I guess, more than just exhibitions as people might remember them, or more than just the midway. They were that community event that everyone looked forward to, which drew a large crowd, and people could reminisce with old friends.
The expression, see you at the fair, because that's how I end all my correspondence when I, email people and talk to people. They see you at the fair, and I think of my mom and dad, my mom, because dad was always a director and worked with the horses, but mom would walk through the fair when she could and see people that she hadn't seen in years. Like I remember her running into her maid of honor from her wedding, and her husband, who was dad's best man, and just talking. And I remember exactly where it was on the fairgrounds.
It was about 1981 or 1982 when we first came, so I was about 10 years old then. My parents actually had a chip truck here, so they had it up above before, and then they moved down by the bathrooms, and we had that chip truck, I think, for 10 years.
Always was a good fair, big fair, but it was a pretty quiet fair. And then in 1972, we lucked out. We got this CBC to film an episode of the Tommy Hunter Show, #1 ranked show at the time on TV at the Kinmount Fair. And so all the regulars showed up at the fair, and guess what? It rained all day. And that was Saturday. But that's why you have more one-day fair. We had a Sunday fair, and Sunday was beautiful like this. And we were on coast to coast, right across the country. And Tommy Hunter and the CBC couldn't buy advertising like that. And the next year, boom, our attendance started doubling, because everyone wanted to see the fair where Tommy Hunter played. Of course, you have to give them a show, otherwise they're not going to come back. And I guess we did, because they kept coming and coming and coming.
Yeah, I remember Tommy Hunter being here. I was busy serving church dinners at the time. I likely didn't see the show, but I remember him being here, and it rained out. He's such a gentleman. He lives up to his name, right? Canada's country gentleman. And it rained, so he came back and played like the next day.
Reports from the Lindsay Post and other local papers detailed every single bit of information about these fairs, whether it's quality of the livestock, the lively entertainment that was provided. And when you look at in the 1800s, the Galway Fair in Kinmount reported a modest profit, but that wasn't without challenges though, because they had poor weather those weekends in the 1800s. And as we're approaching the 20th century, Kinmount continued to grow its fairgrounds every single year. By 1901, a community-driven joint stock company helped develop a new space which allowed for more activities, including livestock competitions, horse racing, and other various displays. And by 1906, 5 years later, the addition of a new racetrack brought even more excitement to the fair. And it became, at this point, a multi-day event that attracted visitors from across the region, from Lindsay, from Orillia, all the way from Ottawa. And this fair was truly that celebration of both agricultural achievement and rural connection between friends and family.
Yes, it's sort of, been up and down, I guess, a little bit. And in a certain way, it seems a little smaller now than what it was when I was younger growing up. We had some big name entertainment back in the day, bigger names, so that drew people here.
Post-war years, though, saw the fair evolve even further. So when we're looking into the 1960s, new facilities like the arena and exhibit hall were built, and this reflected that growing popularity still with the fair. And this is where we're seeing entertainment like chariot races and parachute jumping and community talent shows, because when you think of agricultural fairs, you automatically think this needs a lot more airborne activities. During the 1960s and going into the 70s and 80s, that fair continued to adapt to evolving technologies and changes. And they introduced modern amenities and diverse programming. Local organizations and residents would work together to ensure its success. The Midway, with its dazzling rides and games, brings joy to children and adults alike, while the live entertainment keeps that crowd engaged and focused. From musical performances to motorsports, there's always something for everyone.
A little prejudiced, I must admit, but we're right up there. There's a number of other things that make our fair unique. Besides, we have a lot of entertainment. Our motto is something for everyone. And we do. We have everything from babies right on up to the senior citizen. The whole family can go to the fair. But the one thing that maybe stands out the most is our trailer park. We started that about, oh my gosh, time's starting to fly here, about 40 some years ago. People wanted to come and camp. And they can camp for the whole weekend, come to all 3 days of the fair. And it's just, they're still coming. The trailer park is very, very, very popular. I've heard that one older gentleman who died gave it to one of his children in his will, because he said the kids will fight over my campground. And it's great because the trailer park is beautiful.
As the fair continues to evolve, though, in the 21st century, it remains rooted in those values of innovation and resilience and community, just like it was in the 19th century. And so, with each passing year, the Kinmount Fair carries forward that legacy of those who came before, ensuring that future generations will continue to gather and celebrate and create those memories that will last a lifetime. While the Kinmount Fair has long been a beloved institution and event in the northern reaches of Kawartha Lakes, it is just one piece of a much larger tradition that has shaped the agricultural heritage of the entire region of Kawartha Lakes. Further south, Lindsay hosts a fair of its own. It has grown into one of the largest and most anticipated events in Ontario's agricultural calendar, and that would be the Lindsay Central Exhibition. Like Kinmount, the Lindsay Fair began with modest roots. Over decades, it evolved into a larger regional event that drew visitors from all across the province. Established in the middle of the 19th century, the Lindsay Central Exhibition quickly became a showcase for the region's agricultural prowess. It drew farmers, artisans, and townspeople together each year to buy and sell their products. The fair grew with the town of Lindsay itself. Businesses grew out of the fair.
It was a time for agricultural businesses to show off their products and to sell them to crowds that could measure up to 10,000 people. The Lindsay Fair really started sometime in the 1840s, and it was just an idea at that point, and it would take the Agricultural Society a decade to get it organized. The original location of the fair was somewhere in the George Hamilton and Albert Street South location. The town granted the Agricultural Society this land to have an agricultural show and fair. This land was not suitable to the Agricultural Society soon after taking possession, due to it being on the south side of Kent Street, as well as being in a smaller area. But come 1878, the Agricultural Society purchased a parcel of land of about 8 acres, with the $1,300 they got for their old property that they sold to the railway. It was at this location where they erected the main building, which of course would later become the grandstand. They also built an oval racetrack, which was about 1/5 of a mile, as well as stalls for livestock to show. It was at this location on Adelaide Street that the fair really went from that modest gathering for local farmers to trade livestock and showcase their best crops, to something that was more quickly expanding into a full-fledged exhibition, becoming one of the most anticipated events of the year, at least in Lindsay and Victoria County. By the late 19th century, the Lindsay Central Fair had evolved into a very prominent regional event, drawing visitors from all across the province. Each year, the fair offered a growing number of attractions, be it livestock competitions, produce displays, and eventually mechanical exhibits that showcased the latest farming technology. It also expanded into a place where children can learn. These prizes were won by a child, Roy Hazelton, during his time in school in Mariposa Township. In 1913, he bottled up a variety of seeds that he had selected, and he won 3rd place amongst other school children at the Victoria County Fair that year.
Our Ag Products Committee and our Ag Awareness Committee always are welcoming school children. We try to keep the youth. We host the 4-H East Central Show that's on today. With the 4-H, we have ambassador program. We just are available. We make our grounds available for their shows. We try to promote their activities here. So I think we do a lot of impact for the youth here. When we are talking about the fair and the growth of the fair, it really was due to volunteer members of the Agricultural Society and some very early Lindsay businesses. The displays that the businesses would bring really pulled people in and brought them and gave them a reason to come to the fair. Because back then, there was no, midway. There was no rides to entertain anyone. It was just come see the latest technology that our businesses and our citizens have to offer. One of Lindsay's largest employers and agricultural business at the time was the Sylvester Brothers Manufacturing Company. The Sylvester business would bring their agricultural implements and their equipment that they would make, and they would receive praise for their style, the finish, as well as the superior workmanship of it. During the shows, and what would be reported throughout the area as well as throughout other ridings, was that the business would bring in around 10 or more first place prizes each season. This was really free advertising throughout the papers, and it really set the Sylvester Brothers manufacturing business off. Its roots, it started in Lindsay in 1882, and it exploded onto the agricultural scene during the 1890s at least, and the turn of the century. Sylvester Manufacturing were making binders and making implements and sending them all across the country, even over into the United States as well as the UK. These displays would really bring people in, but it wasn't always about the agricultural side. Grand displays would be set up by local businesses to entice them to buy millinery, buy suits, and buy dresses, as well as gloves and anything else they might need. And there even was a time when dignitaries would come and open the fair. In 1896, the Governor General and his wife Ishbel were invited, and later the ladies of the town hosted her for an evening at the Academy Theatre. You know, back in the day, Victorian-era women really love to host and throw parties, and it wasn't always reserved for the Gilded Age of Toronto or New York or whatever you see on TV. It was in Lindsay to some degree as well. One of those ladies in Lindsay was Lillian Stewart. Lillian was such a fascinating woman when it came to hosting dignitaries or just living her life in general. She would decorate her home with her best linens. She loved ferns, so she would always go out and buy new ferns to decorate the drawing room. And when the Governor General and his wife came, she addressed Lady Aberdeen, Ishbel, by telling her that we appreciate fully the kindly interests which Your Excellency has shown towards our country, our town, and our people, and that Victoria County remain a very fragrant memory in Your Excellency's hearts. Though the days off hosting dignitaries or celebrities, for that matter, are long gone in today's world, the effort that people put into the fair each year really makes a difference.
Well, we start pretty much the day after the previous year's fair ends, and we have over 30 organizing committees here who look after each individual element of the fair. So all of the livestock shows have their own committee, so they are the best people for the job when it comes to organizing those particular shows. We have people who look after the vendors. We have a fantastic group of grounds people who make sure that the grounds look their best. And then I oversee everything to make sure that all the pieces come together, because there are many, many moving parts to the fair. And yeah, it really honestly does take all year. So we do spend we have full-time people who work on this all year long, and we try our best every year to put on the best fair we can, and I have great staff. So all of our organizing committees are volunteer run. So we have about 400 regularly engaged volunteers. So we have an army of volunteers who make sure that everything we need gets done. We could not do what we do here without that group of people who give of themselves every year to make sure that we have what we need. We have a very small group of staff. We have about 6 full-time staff throughout the year. So again, we could not manage that with the staff that we have. So each one of those groups makes sure that their particular section of the fair is good to go. Our board of directors is also volunteer. So we have 15 directors, and all of them are volunteer, including our president.
Growth of the fair from the 1890s to the 1930s really came out from the efforts of the volunteers as well as the South Victoria Agricultural Society, especially from its longtime president, John Carew. Born in 1862 to John and Jane Carew of Emily Township, the family moved to Lindsay in 1867, where John Carew, the young one, attended the Eastward School. He left school at the age of 11 to work at the Thurston Mill, which was located on Sturgeon Lake, where he learned everything there was to know about the lumber trade. In 1941, a unique addition to the fairgrounds came, with the dedication of this statue, The Boy in the Boot. This bronze statue was donated by Mrs. John Hare of Toronto, and she dedicated it to the British War Victims Fund upon the opening of the fair that year in 1941. This statue has since become a symbol of Lindsay's resilience and community spirit. The fountain, which at the time was beautifully constructed of pink and red granite from Head Lake here in Kawartha Lakes, became a focal point at the entrance of the fairgrounds. Though many people today just walk by the statue in its location in the Commonwealth building, the dedication service in 1941 was a very important moment for the community. During the time of war, the fairgrounds not only celebrated local agricultural achievement, but also served as a space for fundraising and solidarity in the war effort. The fountain, with its intricate design and the peaceful image of a boy holding his boot, became a source of pride for the entire region. The fair continued to grow year after year, and the location behind Ross Memorial Hospital started to become small and restricting coming into the 21st century.
Most people really love the Midway. That seems to be the most consistent piece that brings people out. Other than that, the heavy horse show is always a hit. We had about 140 heavy horses here this year. So we were one of the largest heavy horse shows for the fair circuit in Ontario.
From its early days to the modern era today, it still remains that vital part of the region's cultural fabric, drawing together generations of farmers, artisans, and families to really celebrate all that makes rural Ontario unique and Kawartha Lakes stand out amongst the rest.